Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And good morning, y'all, and welcome to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics from a constitutional and conservative viewpoint. Of course, I'm Andrew Cooperrider. As a reminder, the Andrew Cooperrider Show airs Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on WZXI, which is 1280 a.m., 94.1 FM, and 95.5 FM. If you live outside the broadcast area for WZXI, well, have no fear. You can still catch that 9 a.m. showtime Monday through Friday, but you can listen to it on theandrewshow.com. If you go to theandrewshow.com, you'll find a live feed from WZXI that's aired 24/7 on theandrewshow.com. So you can listen not just to my show, but to everything WZXI has to offer throughout the day. And you can listen to that right on theandrewshow.com. Now, if you missed that 9 a.m. show, you don't have to wonder what you missed, because each episode is available starting at 1 p.m. each day on all major podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple, iHeart, and many, many others. It can also be watched on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you want to hear it at 9 a.m., tune into WZXI, and then it's available everywhere else at 1 p.m. And as a reminder, you can always reach out to the show by emailing info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. Oh boy, we got a horse race going now. Things are starting to get interesting in this governor's race. Of course, tomorrow we'll finally know the results, but a new College Emerson poll has come out, and it has Beshear and Cameron neck and neck, both at 47%. As well, both candidates are wrapping up their bus tours as well. And some of you may have gotten a chance to visit when these bus tours stops. Typically the party, so the Democrat Party or the Republican Party, they pay for this bus, and then all of the candidates get to ride around on it. Now, notable point, there's one notable small little story about the bus that does say something, I guess, positive for Cameron, and it appears that Allison Ball, who is our current state treasurer running for auditor, has joined the bus tour this year. And why does that matter? Well, Allison Ball, while running for re-election for treasurer, was pretty hesitant of being around Bevin 4 years ago, was pretty hesitant about being a part of that bus tour. Now, it appears, though, she has tagged along with many of these bus tour stops if she's not on the bus itself, and has had no qualms about being seen with Cameron. Now that says something, because Allison's a very, quote unquote, when it comes to the general, tries to be as non-offensive, of course, as possible, fly under the radar, gather as many votes as she can. And so that's kind of why she tried to stay away from Bevin last time. She felt he was unpopular, but she doesn't have that same concern about Cameron. And that says that the Cameron voter is at least, and Cameron himself is at least not offensive to the majority of voters. You know, something like supporting Bevin maybe was 4 years ago. Maybe you have a concern that would be offensive to a majority of the voters, and now you want to be able to win re-election. You don't have that same concern this year. So that's obviously very interesting. As well, with these bus tours, both Cameron and Beshear have been on them, kind of competing. And it looks like Cameron's had Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, join him, as well as Riley Gaines. Of course, Riley Gaines, former University of Kentucky swimmer, took a big stance on some of this gender craziness, at least in protecting female sports against biological males competing. She had to, of course, compete against the Penn State dude that swims for the women's team, Leah Thomas, I think is what he goes by. Anyways, so, she had to face off against that guy. So she, of course, naturally points out to the fact that this is wrong, and it destroys women's sports in that way. And so, that is her big push. And what you see also at the Cameron bus stops are more so the working class. Now, Beshear crowds, on the other hand have been the kind of tear it all down, kind of young, dumb, ultra liberal types, right? And my point to this, I can kind of look at the end of Bashir's stop in UK to kind of point to why that is with some of the protesters there. So towards the end of the Bashir stop at UK, there were some pro-Palestine protesters. Let me play that for you now. Now, as you listen to it, you're going to hear some background music. That was not put in by me. I believe the Bashir campaign is just playing some music as people take the stage, or at the end as people left the stage, whenever this took place. But here's what they were chanting at that Bashir stop.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
So that's a pretty sizable chunk of the crowd shouting the free, free Palestine bit, of course, holding up the flag that says free, free Palestine, the Palestinian kind of flag thing there. And for those of you unaware, and I know, obviously, I don't touch on national politics in this show too much. So obviously, I haven't talked anything about the Israeli-Gaza war going on. But, one thing we know for sure is that with everything that's going on, if you're conservative, maybe you have a viewpoint that we shouldn't be sending money overseas. Maybe a viewpoint that we shouldn't be sending foreign aid to Israel. But generally speaking, you shouldn't have a viewpoint that Israel shouldn't exist. But these free Palestine people, when the reason why that is anti-Semitic and why that is a problem and why that is pro-terrorist, why that is pro-Hamas, it isn't just because of the timing. Obviously, with everything going on and an active war going on, you are taking the sides of a terrorist group by chanting out the slogan about what they claim they're fighting for, at least on the surface, of free Palestine, but also understand that area that they're talking about. Those people who believe Palestine is under occupation, they believe, and you hear it in other chants they'll say, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. Well, that area that they're talking about the Jordan River there, stretching on up. And so from there, you can draw the conclusion that quite clearly that area involves Israel. Not quite clearly draw the conclusion from the river to the sea, that is the Israeli area. And so if you're saying free Palestine, get rid of the occupation and all those things, you are advocating for the destruction of Israel. And so if that is something that sits well with you, okay, so be it. I don't really understand how you can quite advocate for the destruction of Israel. Like I said, you can be a conservative and not want to send money over to Israel. And I can make those arguments all day long about our foreign aid. We need to take care of course, America first. And Americans, we're in debt, sending money overseas. This is debt our children are going to have to pay. And there is a real conversation to be had there. However, wanting Israel just simply destroyed because you believe somehow they're occupying Palestinian territory, that definitely isn't a viewpoint held by generally reasonable people. Like I said, I know you may have your opinions. You can email me your opinions all you want to. Like I said, this isn't a national show, so hopefully you don't listen to this for my national political takes. I don't know if all of you would agree with all of them, but my main point here is that these are quite literally the very far left liberal types. These are the people that are going out there and supporting Bashir, this kind of burn it all down liberal crowd. But there's also something, and I kind of touched on this earlier of note, the types of people that Cameron brought, Riley Gaines and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and the types of people that Bashir brought with him, most notably Jack Harlow. I kind of want to dig into that a little bit, a tiny bit here. We'll touch on that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics and news from a constitutional and conservative viewpoint. Bear with us, guys. Right after the break, we'll be going over their guests. What's kind of interesting about the dichotomy between Cameron versus Bashir on these guests. We'll be covering that after this short break. We'll see you guys back here in just a few short minutes. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Welcome back, y'all. Before the break, of course, I was talking about the Bashir and Cameron bus tours and the difference of people they brought with them. So I wanted to kind of show why I find this interesting. So as I said, Cameron brought Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Riley Gaines with him. I went on a search on YouTube and I searched both their names and I pulled up the most popular video for them on YouTube. So here's the most popular video for Sarah Huckabee Sanders that you can find on YouTube, at least that I find that pops up first when I search her on YouTube.
First to admit, President Biden and I don't have a lot in common. I'm for freedom, he's for government control. At 40, I'm the youngest governor in the country. And at 80, he's the oldest president in American history. I'm the first woman to lead my state. And he's the first man to surrender his presidency to a woke mob that can't even tell you what a woman is.
So there's Sarah Huckabee Sanders' most popular video that I found on YouTube. That's a person who's traveling with Cameron. Here's another most popular video for Riley Gaines when you search her name on YouTube. This is from a Senate hearing. It's going to start off not with Riley Gaines, but somebody else. And then, of course, she's engaged by the senator there to go ahead and respond to this woman. Here you go.
That, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women. My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
So those are their most popular videos on YouTube, both political, right? Both kind of talking about the similar things. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was responding to, I believe, Biden's State of the Union speech here maybe a few years ago. And then, of course, that was Riley Gaines responding to an erroneous claim that, men somehow don't have a distinct advantage in most sports, which obviously the top men in sports do. I'm not going to pretend like I would swim faster than Riley Gaines. I wouldn't. Maybe I could float longer than her, but I think I have an unfair advantage there of body mass. But anyways, floating body mass. But, when you look at the top level athletes, of course, there's not much competition. That's what she's talking about. Now, let's bring up Jack Harlow, who's a rapper here from Kentucky. He's been riding around with Bashir. I want to bring up his most popular video, but I couldn't quite bring up his most popular video because his most popular video comes from his most popular song. And, that exact video I simply can't play over the airwaves because it's hugely inappropriate. So I'm going to play a quick little clip of his most popular song, an edited, very clean version of it. Not very clean, but the clean radio edit here. Just a few seconds of it here for you guys, as long as we can bear here.
What's poppin'? Brand new whip, just hopped in. I got options. I can pass that like Stockton. Just joshing. I'm spending this holiday locked in. My body got rid of them toxins. Sports in the top 10. I can put the ball in the end zone, put a bad in the friend zone. Sound like an intro jet song, give me that tempo.
All right, that's enough of that. So and I wanted to do that to point out something. The types of people that Cameron brought along with him are political people, and yet Bashir brings along a person who is very famous, but is not very political, right? And to give you some idea of the type of kind of maybe he's got great character, maybe doesn't. I don't know. All I can tell you is here's some of the lyrics from that song. He is from Kentucky, and so obviously that's a reason to bring him along. Very popular with the young people. But here's some of his lyrics from that song. Oh, that's nice to go over some of. Here we go. We're gonna go over it. Okay. Me and my Migos got that free smoke on the West Coast. Yeah, I'm talking about pre-rolls. Dark-haired B-word, and she looked like Shigo? A hometown hero, feeling myself, can't murder my ego. She heard I can't say that. That's inappropriate. Okay, so very inappropriate lyrics, quite clearly, but that's the kind of person Bashir brings along with him. Now, if I'm to be honest, I'll listen to the occasional rap song. I'm more of a country music and bluegrass guy, and while I do recognize that Jack Harlow's music does take some type of talent, a different type of talent than something like bluegrass music or country music, but a talent, I guess, nevertheless. And maybe that's a talent that you personally admire. Maybe it's a talent you don't. Like I said, there's times where I listen to rap music. There's times where I admire that. And I do wonder, though, what it says about Bashir's support base, who they listen to as the quote unquote experts. Because remember, the liberals, the left, they're all about their experts. Listen to the experts, do what the experts tell you to do. And now there's nothing wrong with an artist supporting a politician. I know, Luke Bryan has had Ron DeSantis up on stage at a show or two. I can't remember another time that a musician actually toured on a political bus there at the end. Obviously they take along people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders or Riley Gaines, political people, but not typically, you bring a music artist like that. You bring people who are well-known through political action because they show they have an aptitude or understanding for politics. People that, you would hope the average voter would actually at least listen to or hold in higher regard than someone else. But Jack Harlow, he's not known for being a politician, a politico, being particularly in depth about politics. To really have some understanding about politics, you got to kind of know what goes on behind closed doors. Because if you just step into politics and just start supporting random people, you're going to end up supporting the kinds of people that you end up looking back on once you realize who they are and what they do and say, oh, those are awful people. Why did I ever do that? So Jack Harlow, he can have his opinion, but I don't know why people would necessarily view that as a super important opinion they need to gravitate to. Let me put it another way. Maybe that makes sense, right? Imagine you had cancer and needed some type of specialized surgery that had a 50-50 chance of a positive outcome. And then imagine going to your favorite UK basketball player, whoever that may be, and a UK basketball player who doesn't have any experience with this surgery, this cancer, or anything, knows nothing about it, and asking them who is the best doctor, instead of going to other medical professionals and asking them. As I said, it's not like Jack Harlow can't have an opinion on politics. I just don't see why someone should value his opinion more than they value their next door neighbor's opinion. He doesn't have any particular insights. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm pointing that out to say that Bashir's base, when you look at Cameron's base, you're looking at older people, more experienced in life, have dealt with a lot of politicians probably before, heard from a lot of them. And then you look at Bashir's base, who's he's encouraging to turn out. It's definitely a younger crowd, least in experience, that is looking at somebody like Jack Harlow for political leadership. Instead of looking at people who are well experienced in politics to point them in the right direction, people that have at least a little more understanding of the backgrounds, it just kind of tells you where their values are. At the beginning, I talked about the new Emerson College poll that has Bashir at 47%, Cameron at 47%. And I want to take a few moments to dig into that poll, some prior polls, and see what we can learn, see what we can guess, what's going to tell us what will be the outcome tomorrow. What can we dig into, right? And polls can be very helpful for this. They're not the end all be all, but you need to combine polling with other polls, not necessarily looking at percentages, but polling out what kind of conclusions you can make, as well as an understanding of where the base is, where the state is, where the party is, what are the trends of generally people. So a few good points for Cameron. One, Bashir has been really stagnant. So going through the polling history, this current poll, where's Cameron at? What are some good things that we can point to say this will mean a Cameron victory? Well, he's been gaining, right? We've seen some polls where he's been pretty low in the numbers. He's been pretty drastically low in one of them, though there is some methodology issues with that poll we'll go over here in a bit. But anyways, so he's been gaining. So it's showing he's got momentum, and momentum can really help in those final days, help push you over the edge, help you carry through. Meanwhile, though, Bashir's been very, very, very stagnant. He polled at the very beginning of campaign season, right after the primary. They ran a poll of Cameron versus Beshear, and Beshear was polling at 49%. Beshear, 4 years ago, when he ran against Bevin, pulled in 49.2%. So he hadn't gained any percentages compared to what happened last time. Because remember, he gained 49.2% 2 years ago, but there was also a third-party candidate, a libertarian listed on the ticket, John Hicks. He got 2 percentage points, and that can happen when a name's actually listed. This time around, we got some writing candidate running. I don't even exactly can't remember his name for the life of me in the moment right now. But generally speaking, writing candidates where you got to physically write that in, they're not going to pull nearly the same percentage as somebody like John Hicks would, whose name gets printed on the ballot. So that pulls away. So he was at 49% 4 years ago, and he's still at 49%. But what has the poll said since May? That is the question that helps us point to what will happen tomorrow on election day. But if you want to hear about that, you're going to have to come back with us after this break. We're running up against the break here. So we're going to take this short break. And after that, we're going to dig more into what these polls tell us, what the trends are telling us, who's going to win tomorrow, Beshear versus Cameron. We'll have that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics and news from a constitutional and conservative point of view. Remember, you can reach the show out, reach out to the show at info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. We'll see you all back here in just a few minutes. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics and news from a constitutional and conservative point of view. Before the break, I was talking about the new Emerson poll has him at 47%, but about how Beshear's been stagnant. So as I mentioned, he had took 49.2% of the vote 4 years ago against Bevin. He gets polled in May. He's at 49%. And other than one poll where he popped up to 51, he's been at 49% since May in almost all polling. The only person who's gained ground is Cameron. For all the tens of millions of dollars that the Beshear campaign and the Beshear PACs and the PACs supporting Beshear have spent, he's only gained, he's stayed remarkably the same. Actually, if you look at it, he's lost a percentage point or two, according to this most recent poll. Since then, very stagnant. And that points to some good news for Cameron, because as I said, there's really not a third party. So if Beshear stays put at that 49-ish%, and Cameron is able to pull off a 51%, well, then, of course, that equals victory for Cameron. So that's a good point here. But there's another key point from this Emerson poll. So it had Cameron and Beshear both at 47%, but 4% were undecided. 2% said they'd vote for somebody else or something else. They're just not going to show up to vote. There's no really other candidates they're going to vote for. So I'm going to point at this 4% undecided. Well, when that 4% undecided, when they were pushed and said, hey, if you had to vote, though, who would you choose? Who would you pick? Well, at a 2-to-1 ratio, the undecided voters went for Cameron. And of course, this isn't unexpected, but that flip meant that once undecided voters, once they were pushed, tally taken, Cameron had 49% to Beshear's 48%. And a lot of that push, this race has come from one, Trump voters are coming home for Cameron. And obviously, I'm told that the Trump ad has been getting out there on TV. I covered this last week. I said, where's the Trump video at? And then the next day or so later, they released the Trump video. And now I said, hey, make sure we're getting that up on TV. And it looks like they've been doing it. I've seen a few comments from people saying that they've seen that Trump ad on TV. That's good stuff. That's good stuff for Cameron. So that's helping push those Trump voters over. Obviously, Beshear's endorsement of Biden is hurting him probably more than he expected. So you got some people coming home there for Cameron. And it's not unexpected that undecided would fall so heavily for Cameron. Because if you're not decided on Beshear yet, you've had him as governor for 4 years. You've been hit with unending campaign ads for the last several months. If you're not decided on Beshear yet, you're never going to be decided on Beshear. So it makes sense that such a large percentage of undecideds would go ahead and flip for Cameron, putting him over the edge. So undecideds breaking for Cameron. That's good stuff. Obviously, Trump hammering Bashir on Biden, putting that out. That's good stuff, pushing Trump voters over. Hopefully, it's not too little, too late. And then there's another factor, too. This Black Voters Matters group. I talked about their radio ad, I think, last week or so ago. And, we talked about how racist and awful it is. For those of you unaware of that ad, there's a group out there running an ad that is from a Black Lives Matter offshoot PAC called Black Voters Matter. And they're running this ad where they call Cameron basically a race traitor. They say all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And they called Cameron Uncle Cameron in terms to Uncle Tom, a trope to say he's a race traitor. Why? Because he doesn't have the same viewpoints they do. That if you're not a liberal Democrat, well, then you ain't Black. And I think that's blowing up a bit in their face, because the people who already thought that way, the people who already thought of it in those kinds of terms, that think, well, you can't be Black unless you're Democrat, they were never going to vote for Cameron in the first place. But by running that ad, I think it turns off a lot of the more moderate voters that maybe would have went for Bashir. They're looking at that like, oh, golly, that's pretty awful. And not to mention that after the backlash for that ad, obvious racism, they doubled down on it and they put out a image to go along with it where they're once again implying Cameron's a Uncle Tom, and it says skin folk ain't kinfolk on it. And, I even post that up on Facebook, on Twitter, saying, look at this. They're doubling down on this racism here. This stereotyping, this saying that you can't be Black if you're a Republican. And then I had Democrats and liberals coming on and defending it, saying it's not racist. What are you talking about? Several of them, not one or two, but several. I think the average moderate person sits there, looks at that and says, no, that's racist. Stereotyping is, we are told stereotyping is racist. If it is racist to have Aunt Jemina on the syrup bottle, then how is it not racist to call Cameron all these mean, nasty names and to attack him for the color of his skin politically because you disagree with his viewpoints? How is that not racist? And the average moderate voter, they know that. They're thinking people. They're not dumb. They may be busy. They may not pay a whole lot of attention all the time, but they're not dumb. And they see that. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they would defend that. They agree with this. I think that has hurt Bashir. Those kind of racist, awful ads, I think it makes Bashir look really, really bad. Now, again, too, the other thing that Cameron has going for him is that historically, polls have been underrepresenting Republican support in Kentucky. Now, maybe changing, that younger electorate is becoming more voting age. So maybe the underrepresentation might start to flip more for Democrats as the younger voters start to become older and vote more, because obviously they're not going to be reaching that more traditional way. I mean, how are you polling them? By calling people up on the phone? I can tell you this much, right? I personally don't take very many surveys because the phone number that most people have for us is an office phone number for one of my businesses. That's the number I provided when for a lot of these political type questionnaires I get, or a number that I leave, when you sign up for your registration, you can give them a phone number. That's the phone number I've given them. And so that's the phone number that gets the text, that gets the calls. My personal cell, it doesn't get it. And so I don't receive those same things. And so therefore you're not polling me. And I have to imagine more young people are like that, compared to if you're going to do a live answer poll, who do you think's more likely to actually respond to a live answer poll? The older electorate is way more likely to do so than the younger electorate. And when you look at the Emerson poll, it quite clearly points out that the older electorate, not old, but the electorate that's in kind of that middle-aged, 40s to 60s or so voter is breaking really hard for Cameron, not Bashir, while the younger voters breaking really hard for Bashir and not Cameron. And then the older voters are pretty, the real senior citizens they're pretty split. And so the reason why that's important to this polling and why it may not be great for Cameron is that, well, you could see this change in polling where the Democrats end up getting underrepresented in polls. That's very possible because you do have that younger electorate that's getting a hold of. Now, what does Bashir have to look at positively on this Emerson poll and past polls? What's going on positively, Bashir? Well, he has, of course, historically always been ahead. In fact, in their last poll, he had a big lead, like double digits. Now, there's a big difference in methodology between the last Emerson College poll and this one, and that was who they surveyed. This most recent one, they surveyed likely voters. In the last survey, they just surveyed registered voters. So in a higher turnout situation, a poll like the older one, it will tell you a little bit more, because if you have people showing up to vote that normally don't, well, they wouldn't have been polled in this Emerson poll. And in this most recent one that only polled likely voters. So in the poll that polled registered voters, those stats heavily broke for Bashir. Double digits, Bashir was up on Cameron. Once again, a large amount of undecided, but he was up double digits. And so that tells me that more of the the people that don't often vote seem to be more likely to vote for Bashir. We're going to go over, one, if we can expect those people to turn out to vote, and two, why that might be after this short break. You're, of course, listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics from a constitutional and conservative perspective. We'll continue on this poll, continue going over this after this short break. We'll see you guys back here in just a few minutes. Bear with us. We'll see you here soon. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before the break, I was talking about this new Emerson College poll. I've talked about what it means for Cameron, the good stuff for Cameron. Now we're talking about the possible good stuff for Bashir off that poll, in order to try to glean what might happen tomorrow. So as I was talking about before the break, Bashir, the polling has kind of pointed to that. If it is a higher turnout, that may favor Bashir. So what do we know so far about turnout, right? What do we know based upon the data we currently have? Well, we have some data back from the first day of early voting that indicate a pretty significant uptick, a 30% uptick. 30% more people voted on the first day of early voting this past week than voted 1 year ago during the midterm. This is an off year. You're seeing 30% more. So this has led a lot of experts to guess that turnout might be as high as 50%, or just north or right around 1.75 million voters. To give you some idea, that's 300,000 more people voting than 4 years ago when Bashir squared off against Bevin. What's interesting is in that election where Bashir won against Bevin, they had a higher turnout than they had 4 years ago. So higher turnout could help Bashir, certainly if his base is more fired up, and they may be, and you've got some data to kind of support that. Because when you look at that early turnout, you had 84,643 people come out to vote on that first day of early voting, but there's 9,500 more of those people were registered Democrats than Republicans, or 53% of day one early voters. But keep in mind, Democrats only make up 43.8% of registered voters in Kentucky compared to Republicans, 46%. So you should see more Republican vote. To see that, you have to have not just an equal amount of turnout. You would have to see greater than 6%. It's showing up 10 percentage points higher than it should be. That's some trouble. That tells you that maybe they're not as fired up. Now, of course, Republicans, they are more often to turn out on election day to vote. We know that. We know Republicans turn out in greater numbers on election day, but that gap is still pretty sizable and it needs to be closed up. Keep in mind, this was first day voting numbers only. Now, we should here soon get the data for the other voting days. I might be able to tell us something. Maybe I can talk about that tomorrow. But this points also to another thing that's positive for Bashir, assuming, of course, that Democrats turning out are actually voting for Bashir too, because Kentucky and other southern states have an odd group of Democrat voters that are not Democrat at all, but instead will always vote Republican, but they're still registered Democrats. So if Democrats do turn out and they're voting Republican, if Democrats turn out greater numbers than Republicans and Bashir still loses, it does just go to show how far the crazy left Democrats have gotten in the eyes of the voters, that even people still registered Democrat are voting Republican even in the big races. And realistically, high turnout gives us some concerns as well when we look at excitement on the ground. I mean, many people relate that they're seeing more ads, mailers, door knockers, signs, and such for Bashir. And the base, of course, for Bashir seems more fired up than the base for Cameron. And I'm saying this as a conservative. And there's good reason for it. One, both sides are fired up to stop the other guy. So, the base of Republicans are fired up to stop Bashir. And there's a base of Bashir people fired up to stop Cameron. Cameron's Brown Taylor. He's awful. He's a dirty MAGA Republican. He's far right extremist, even though Cameron is, if anything, pretty moderate. But he's, of course, a very far right extremist. He must be stopped at all costs. And of course, on the right, we see Bashir for the tyrant he is. We want to stop him. But the other thing is that Democrats are more likely to be fired up because Bashir represents their last vestige of power at the state level. Bashir gets defeated. You don't have a single major Democrat in any position other than, I guess, Congressman there up in the Louisville congressional district, Morgan McGarvey, Congressman McGarvey. He's a Democrat, covers that Louisville area congressional district there. He's going to be the highest elected Democrat, one Democrat there. They've got no voice up there in the legislature, hardly at all. They've got, less than 20-ish or so. Legislators in the House and 7 out of 38 in the Senate. I mean, they just really there are caucuses of Republicans bigger than the entire amount of elected Democrats in Frankfurt. And so they're more fired up because this is their last vestige of power. This is the last hope. I mean, Bashir goes down. The Democrat Party in Kentucky is definitely dead. They're flatlined. They're done for at least, I'd say, a good 10 years before they could maybe rally back. So I think that the Democrat base is more fired up and that Republicans are seeing that too as well, because it's not just me saying this. When you look at this poll asked, who do you believe will win? And over 60% of respondents in this Emerson College poll said they believe that Bashir would win. They believe that Cameron would lose. And that doesn't just point to excitement, but it points to a perception of a number of things. I mean, I think Republicans generally right now are going through some issues of, a defeatist mindset. And there's a good reason why we have this defeatist mindset, this belief that it doesn't matter what we do. I mean, look nationally, right? We had every social media company censoring standard conservative beliefs, censoring basic debates. You can't misgender on Twitter for a long time or you get kicked off. You can't have conversations about things that we know to be 100% true now got you removed off social media. And that's been going on for 3 or 4 years. And then when you had a company like Parler come along that was making some ground, some inroads and presenting an alternative, the powers that be just shut it down and bankrupted it. It's gone away. You had a close presidential re-election where they did everything they could. States changed the rules, sometimes illegally. FBI colluded with Twitter. The Hunter Biden laptop story squashed by government collusion where you couldn't even talk about it. Meanwhile, the FBI knew it was true because they had that laptop for 10 months before it hit the media at all. Then you've got people in control of the government now that act like that the Republicans, the people currently in control of our government, act like Republicans that voted for Trump are literally destroying the country. They're insurrectionists. They're awful. They're MAGA major extremist terrorists, and they need to be dealt with at all costs. And we're inclined to believe that that is more than just far left rhetoric. When you have Trump on 96 indictments, all novel legal theories, as in they're trying to create cases and laws and things that's never been done before, just in order to try to get Trump. You got a legal system that's been torn to shreds. You have Hillary Clinton not getting in trouble for things. Then that they try to point to Trump doing is saying, he's got to go to prison. You've got a guy right now going to federal prison over posting memes saying text your vote for Hillary on Twitter. He sent out a graphic on Twitter that said, if you want to vote for Hillary, text in your tweet. They couldn't show a single person that didn't vote because of that, he's being thrown in federal prison for suppressing the vote. And meanwhile, a woman who did the same exact thing, but to Trump voters. So if you're a Trump voter, text in your vote, doesn't even get charged. People getting charged for just existing near the Capitol building on January 6th, not even going in it. Parents getting called domestic terrorists at school board meetings. And meanwhile, half of our elected leaders that call themselves Republicans seem to have no clue what's going on. We've got McConnell, Lindsey Graham, you got Romney, and these types that seem to care more about making sure Ukraine gets another 10, 20, 30, 40, $100 billion, and they can continue to fund the military state than they care about their own citizens. And yet they call themselves conservative. Well, they conserve nothing. They certainly aren't conserving our values. They'd rather not even deal with social issues, or they acquiesce to them. So yeah, it's a little hard not to have a defeatist attitude when you're a Republican. And I mean, that's something that Republicans have to deal with. That's something that Republicans are going to have to address, and they can't bury their heads in the sand. The fact that 60% of respondents believe Bashir will win, it just points to the fact that they don't trust the government. They don't trust the system. They don't trust that Republicans can continue to win. And that means you've got to point a clear vision and a way. And not only that, but show how things will be different. And I've said this time and time again, if Cameron loses, that will be the number one mistake he made. He never painted a clear picture of what does a Cameron governorship look like. What does a Cameron administration accomplish? We know what Bashir will do. It's tyranny, but he never showed us what he would do quite. He was very short on policy. I still hope he pulls it out tomorrow. I guess we'll see tomorrow. Well, y'all, that's what we've got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Man, the hour flies by quick. We'll be back here tomorrow, of course, at 9 a.m. with your next show. We've got more to cover. I had stories teed up for today that I'm not even able to get to. So we'll get to that tomorrow, guys. We'll see you. You all have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon.